As you can see, this is a Fleur de Lis. These were put on the north edge of the compass roses. You'll see it often superimposed with a phoenix, which is significant. A lot of times, you'll see all these symbols put together, the compass, the rose, the cross, and the phoenix. You can usually tell the phoenix because it has a little distinctive little tuft of feathers on the back of his head. Looks like an eagle, but it's a phoenix, especially when it's combined with these symbols. This is kind of a muddy picture, but it's the same idea. The rose cross up here. Here's a red cross and the compass, and then your phoenix underneath. Very enigmatic. This is a rose cross also, and you can see the strange geometric sort of redundancy going on here. They're measuring circles, compasses, and then you have a distinctive 4 animals on each point. What does that mean? One of the most important things then to understand then is their focus of the illuminated fraternities on this symbol. This is Irenaeus in the Middle Ages was able to kind of pull together the symbols from ancient times that you would actually find in the Old Testament, these cherubim beings that have 4 faces, and he applied that to the gospel writers. This one happens to be the gospel writer John. And here they are all represented together, the 4 gospel writers, and John's down here with, for some strange reason, 3 crosses on his head. The symbol has 3. In the Old Testament, the cherubim were typically drawn with a human face, wings of an eagle, 4 fronts of a lion, and then the back part would have been a part of a bull. These ones are almost correct because the tail would curl the right way. This is the Ark of the Covenant. This is the Holy of Holies, a rendition of what it might have looked like. And this is an interpretation of what that actually may have symbolized. On the ecliptic of the zodiac, the ecliptic is where we sight the sun as it travels around the earth. You'll have 12 major signs. And at the 4 corners where the stars are the brightest, you have Aquarius, which would be the face of the man, Taurus, the bull. Here, you'd have Scorpio, but in ancient times it was just called Ophiuchus, which was the serpent contender. And it wasn't a scorpion, it was a man stepping on a scorpion holding a snake, and then some other symbols would be this bird, an eagle, which also contends with serpents. And then Leo here, who has eagle wings, but it's one of the only images I could get that would look like it was actually made to be in the zodiac. It's interesting, too, that in the Old Testament, the tribes of Israel had symbols that they were given, and they were always supposed to be ordered around the tabernacle in this configuration that, if you look at the symbols, correspond to these 4 corners of the ecliptic in symbols. And here, the eagle is at the north, which corresponds to the tribe of Dan. There's more to this symbol. You'll see in grimoires and works of Freemasonry a connection between this eagle symbol and this Ouroboros, as it's called, the tail eater, or what Jung has actually talked about as some symbol that means cycles of time. But it is ubiquitous. It goes all over the world. It's ancient. It's one of the most ancient symbols there are. This is an Aztec one. Here's one from a gravestone in England. Of course, the Chinese one. This one is interesting because it comes from a postcard from Rosh Hashanah. And this is depicted as it's actually a fish that they eat during the beginning of the new year. And it actually says here, Leviathan. So if you go and look up Leviathan in a concordance, in a dictionary of Hebrew, you'll actually find out that it does indeed mean to connect, a serpentine form connected. And you'll find that if you look at the zodiac and the 4 corners of the zodiac, there's something very interesting about its configuration in heavens. This is the Milky Way. It crosses 2 places only on the ecliptic. here, and here. And you'll notice that it's right next to the eagle. In fact, it's a very important place because this, the Milky Way, actually does, in fact, appear like a serpent. This is its mouth, its eye, and the tail is going into its mouth. Here's it enhanced for you. And I'm still facing the same way. There's the mouth and the tail going into the mouth. Here's a close-up of the same thing. And the eagle appears right over its head. This is galactic central point. We're looking at the galaxy that we're in at a very shallow angle, on edge. And this is where the center of the galaxy is. And this always is there on this ecliptic point. It doesn't move along here, neither does this side. It's always fixed here. The only thing that moves is our perspective as we move through here when we look at the sun. We're just going around the sun, and we're sighting the sun through the zodiac through every year. And this is basically where the eagle would appear. Now, I'm sure people are going to start seeing a similarity between the myth of the phoenix rising from the ashes of his demise, a glowing pyre, and being reborn. Because this is the area where this actually takes place, it becomes very significant if you know that there's an actual thing that's happening as we move every year through this ecliptic. It's called the Precession, and it means that we will sight the, let's move back here. We will sight the sun through here at a certain point in the year, and every year it'll move the most minuscule amount. In fact, it'll take 72 years for us to move 1 degree and actually see the sun rise in a different place along this ecliptic. It takes exactly 25,920 years to move in one complete circuit. And it's interesting that you'll see this oftentimes in illuminated manuscripts, the word Leviathan here, Levitan, and then it's a circumscribed pentagram. And the reason for that is it's an equation in geometry. It explains precession. Here you have 360 degrees, and between each one of these points of a circumscribed pentagram, you'll have 72 degrees. Multiply them together, you get exactly the length of time it takes to move one circuit in precession. And that's why it's such a big deal. And quite a few illuminated persons use this symbol without actually understanding it. They just feel it has great power. Well, it does because it explains some of the greatest forces that are taking place all around us, but we can't really define them except through geometry. Another interesting connection here is this Leviathan-type symbol surrounded by the zodiac. There's other symbols here too. There's a symbol of a half moon and a star, and it gets pretty in-depth. But the main point is that they're related. And the reason they're related is if you know that the ecliptic is crossed by the galaxy in 2 places, then it becomes very significant then if we actually sight it during one of the cardinal points of our year, say an equinox or a solstice. In fact, it's so significant that you'll actually, if you understand this, go back into history, you'll be able to mark this point in time here that takes, it's actually a quaternary point through the precession that lasts 25,920 years. Divide it in 4 places, it'll actually equal 6,480 years. You'll find that if you go back from now, 6,480 years, you're ending up in the place where historians peg civilization actually has, having been born, almost out of nothing. Go back another 6,480 years, you'll end up in every time with a configuration that looks like this. Geologists actually mark that year of 2 quaternary precessions with the division between the Pleistocene and the Holocene, where there was a massive global die-off. This is what this looks like. When you reach the point of the precession where you're at that middle place, where the sun's rising in the center of the galaxy, this is how the ecliptics align to it. And this will occur one day out of the whole year. But when this is aligned to one of our equinoxes or solstices, it takes on extreme significance, because you have all the symbols connect at the same time. Here you have the primordial mound that the Egyptians were talking about, the nest of fire that the phoenix is born from, the sun rising in the nest, activating it, the center of the galaxy, and the ecliptic running through here. And if this is aligned with the solstice or an equinox, all the points are matching, because what it means is we've moved through a quarter of the precession, and big things happen then. As I was saying, if you start from 2012 and move back 6,480 years, you end up at the birth of history and civilization. Move back again, the same distance, the division between the Pleistocene and the Holocene, and a massive die-off of more than 90% of the flora and fauna in North America and Europe. Move back again, height of the glacial epoch, and before that, you can actually find no trace of the more ancient hominids. Mankind, Homo sapiens, seems to have been installed here on the Earth. And I'm not saying that we were put here from space, but it seems that we didn't have much competition after that point. This is when this symbol will happen again, on the winter solstice, 2012. It's happening right now, actually, because the actual movement through here is so slow. But it's significant that if you tie this in with the 33 1/3 degrees in the navigational system that's revered by the illuminated societies, you end up with quite a lot of significance to these things. You can actually see more of, or actually understand more of what's going on with the phoenix when you see it's been made into, in the Rosicrucian lore, a double-headed thing with the sun rising in the middle. It's symbolizing the beginning of time and the ending of time, the division of time, and that place where the heavens actually divide time. If you go to any Masonic building where rituals are held, where you go to meet, if you are part of the whole group of echelons of illuminated fraternities, you'll find that they've been dedicated to two Johns, always the two Johns, the ones that bracket the gospel, John the Baptist and then John the Revelator. He's symbolized by a double-headed eagle, always surmounted by the number 33, and inscribed in the floors of a Masonic hall will always be these two posts, which symbolize the two Johns, and the sun in the center of it, which is hearkening back to that symbol of what happens when the sign of the end of the age happens, that coordinary division of the precession. Every Freemasonic lodge has one of these, and they're usually perched on top, sculptures, and this is from Morals and Dogma, the book that's given to most initiated Freemasons. This is a Rosicrucian symbol. We've incorporated all these things too, but it's trying to say that there's a future point that's significant. Here's all the points connected, 33 1/3, order out of chaos. In every one of the cases where you go back 6,000